As a lifelong Android glazer, I've always wanted the latest and greatest in smartphone tech. My main phone for the past year or so has been a Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, one of the best flagship smartphones of 2022, and still a great phone today for the price to performance. But I broke my S22 Ultra after a really unfortunate drop, so I needed a cheap replacement fast. So today I'm going to be going over my experience using the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 after its launch. So here it is. This is my Samsung Galaxy Note 8 that I picked up for just $40 USD. You can obviously see that my model has some fairly significant cosmetic damage. Nothing that affects the functionality of the phone, but it was definitely noticeable throughout the few days that I was actually using it. For media consumption, I opted to use my iPad instead. But if this phone were to be brand new, this display would still be incredible even in 2025. Rocking a 1440p 60Hz panel, which can get up to 1200 nits of peak brightness, this display should theoretically be incredible, but in my situation, it was not ideal. It's a 6.3-inch display, which actually didn't feel too dissimilar from the 6.8-inch screen on my S22 Ultra. The 60Hz panel was also less of an issue than I thought it would be, as the phone still feels smooth to use and relatively snappy. The display also was not an issue to use outdoors. Yeah, functionally it might be dimmer than my S22, but I didn't notice it substantially enough to affect my daily use outdoors. The 6GB of RAM that came with the phone is also not a huge issue, but what it was an issue was the storage. My model has 64GB of internal storage, which just doesn't cut it in 2025. In the 4 days or so that I dailyed this phone, I already filled up half of the storage. If I had used it for much longer, I probably would have had to deal with the lack of space. But let's talk a little bit about the battery life. It goes without saying, but the battery life on an 8-year-old smartphone is obviously going to be pretty severely degraded. I felt as if I had to be on the charger constantly, and the battery would last for about 4 hours with mixed use. It's not bad for the age, but it's not good for the current year. The battery would also get fairly hot while just doing basic tasks like scrolling Instagram or Twitter while I'm having music play in the background. One kind of annoying issue that I noticed, and many other reviewers have actually pointed out, is the location of the fingerprint sensor. I liked having it on the back of the phone, but I would constantly find my finger searching for the right area where the sensor was, constantly smudging the camera or putting my finger on the wrong side. But if we're speaking of cameras, I still think this camera holds up amazing. It has 2 cameras on the back, one 12-megapixel sensor, and then one 12-megapixel 2x telephoto sensor. While it's not the best for flagship 2025 standards, obviously, this 8-year-old camera still blows any modern mid-range or budget phone out of the water. While I also appreciate the headphone jack and the micro SD card slot, I didn't find myself using them whatsoever. I don't own many spare SD cards, and I've already migrated to using wireless earbuds. I actually didn't find the performance of the phone to be that bad. Yeah, it's slower to open apps than I'm used to, but the wait times weren't that bad. My model has the Snapdragon 835 chip with 6GB of RAM, but they also made an Exynos model for the global release outside of America. The Note 8 only got software updates to Android 9, which makes it pretty outdated for app support. I found that I was unable to download my banking app because it no longer supported my version of Android. I considered playing around with a custom ROM, but some research showed me that most custom ROMs for the device required the global Exynos variant, which I don't have. So I decided to stick with Android 9. A majority of my apps were supported, so it didn't really matter to me, although your mileage may vary. So would I recommend picking up a Samsung Note 8 in 2025? Well, the answer is both a yes and a no. I still think this is one of the best Samsung phones ever designed, but its overall performance in the current year is lackluster to say the best. If you need a secondary phone or a spare phone just to use in an emergency, this isn't the worst choice you can make, but for only $40 to $50, it's not like you're making a huge investment you might regret later. Just make sure you get one in good condition.